All right, guys, what language?
German.
Cheater.
I did cheat. I really
It's German,
did.
no.
I really did.
All right,
I took a peek.
number one stunner right there. All right, so, hey, we have a major announcement, guys. This is super exciting. Shout out to Feedspot. They ranked us the number 3 real estate podcast in Miami. So that's huge.
Wow.
So, hey, thank you, Feedspot. We appreciate you watching our podcast, giving us some shine. We hope to do you right. And thanks again. Guys, if you want to learn more about other amazing podcasts, please check out the Feedspot article. It'll be at the bottom of the comments on YouTube. I don't know about Spotify, but I'll look into it. If I can put it in, I will. So, major shout out to our sponsors today. Give it up for the AV Club, everybody. Khalid, we love you, man. We love you so much. Thank you for always opening your doors to us. And then, of course, our second sponsor is the YPN Global Congress and International Property Show. Guys, if you aren't joining us in Dubai, ask us about it. It is February 27th through 29th of 2024. We hope to see you there. So today's podcast is all about the importance of understanding contract timelines for buyers and sellers. So, Dania, let's talk timelines. What do you got?
Timelines, the most important part of any transaction. It is not only the buyer's agent's responsibility to make sure that they set clear expectations, but it's also the listing agent's objective to make sure that the buyer's agent is following through. So the first thing that I do on the buyer side, let's say, because I do both sides, I send out a critical timeline and I tell you, okay, escrow deposit is due this date, our association application is due this date, our inspection period is due this date. They'll get more into the actual dates, but I just make sure it's very clearly itemized. And then throughout the process, it is my job to make sure that I let that buyer know that if you default and you make anything due the day after that anything is supposed to be in, you have the you could default in your escrow, okay? And your money is my money. So you better believe that I'm going to be on it, because if anything happens to that money, I feel almost obligated to reimburse it. I mean, I'm not really obligated to reimburse it, but if that were to happen, God forbid that were to happen, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But I think the most important thing, they're going to get deeper into it, but the most important thing is that both sides are equally as responsible, because it is our job to protect the public.
Amen to that. Yeah, and, we have a big name on our hands. We're Miami Realtors. We really do have to be the voice for the public. We got to protect them over anything, right, Dania?
Exactly.
Perfect.
That was what I studied to pass my real estate exam. And I take that home and I practice that every single day, because it is our job to hold their hands, because they have no idea what's going on. And if anything goes haywire, it's on us.
No,
Yeah.
and I love how you mentioned how it's the buyer's agent and the listing agent's responsibility, both, to keep track of those important dates, because we are probably the only industry, if not one of the few, that there's 2 competing salespeople working together to get paid. So it's almost like a partnership once you enter into a contract. You both want to make sure that both your customers close.
And there has to be some type of clear communication, because that's like crucial to a transaction. Sometimes I've heard people like, oh, the listing agent's not answering my calls, or this and that. As long as you do your job, whomever you're representing, then I think you should be fine. And it's always, like Dania said, cover your client's escrow, because it's not fun to let them know that their escrow is going to be dispersed to the other party.
I think that it's really good to also have a transaction coordinator, because they facilitate everything that's going on with the contract. So while we're out on the streets as, sellers agents or buyers agents, they're the ones that make sure that we're on task and making sure that we're able to do everything that we need to do, even though we're not actually, at home on our computers. So that's the best route to go, especially if you have access to a transaction coordinator.
Sure, and I've heard a lot about transaction coordinators. For the record, I'm not in the real estate business. I'm in the association business, but a great way to get your feet wet and to really know the ins and outs of the contracts, the timelines, and everything else is to start out as a transaction coordinator. And I know some of the biggest sharks in the game actually started as TCs and then took over everything else. So it's food for thought, guys. Food for thought. So let's change up topics now. Esther, what are some of the common challenges or delays that can occur during a timeline of a real estate contract, and how can they be addressed or avoided?
Sure. So I firmly believe that, Dania, right? Dania? Okay, as Dania mentioned that, you know, it's important that the listing agent and the buyer's agent have that, you know, how do I say it? That understanding, right? Just like what Katherine said, that, you know, we are servicing the buyer, but we are also servicing the seller. And I firmly believe in clear communication, right? So yes, deadlines are to be met, but it's when you've established, hopefully, good rapport with the listing agent or with the buyer's agent that, hey, listen, we have a timeline here, we have deadlines to meet. Let's make sure that at a specific time throughout the day, we are communicating, whether it's via text message, via phone call, via email, so everyone's on the same page. Oftentimes, that is a challenge. There are listing agents and there are buyer's agents that do not answer, that ghost, and you're almost pulling your hairs because it's like, okay, you have this deadline, you know, escrow, right, needs to be in the account in a certain amount of days. Appraisal needs to take place in a certain amount of days, inspection, and when you have one professional who is not cooperating or communicating clearly, it just makes the transaction a little bit more difficult.
You
So
can
I
also
think,
contact their broker if
yeah,
they're not a broker, because sometimes the person is a broker.
I'll say something. When I enter into any contract, I always have that conversation right from the gate. And I say, listen, if there's any sort of delays, let's say we have an inspection period. At one point, we had such a crazy market, we were doing like 3-day inspection periods, 1-day inspection periods. And I would say, if we do the inspection and there's other things that arise, is your seller open to working with us to give us more time? Let's say we need to look at the roof or the AC or anything else. At least we know that they're on the same page. If they're going to be unreasonable and they're going to bully us, then why are you going to make your buyer pay, you know, hundreds of dollars for an inspection, and the seller's not even going to let them further inspect things that need to be further inspected? I think we're shifting out of that bullish market, which is good for our buyers. I think it's just healthy all around. But that's something that I think is really important to point out.
And the stress that comes with that, because not only are you stressed, but your buyer's stressed. And if you knew that from the beginning, you could have saved everyone like the whole headache.
Good point. All right, so let's stay on the topic of the timeline. Katherine, in a rapidly changing real estate market like Dania alluded to, how do timeline considerations differ in a buyer's market versus a seller's market?
Well, we just saw that not too long ago in the last 2 crazy years that we had. You have to really know your timelines, addendums, anything that affects the contract and how you can use it, not so much to your advantage, but in the protection depending on who you are working with. Like, for example, if you have a listing and it's a condo, you technically don't have a fully executed contract unless you have the condo writer. And in the condo writer, you need to make sure that you're asking for the condo docs. If you're on the buyer side, you want to make sure that you get all 5 different condo docs. So you don't sign that you received them. If you're halfway through the contract, even if inspection period has passed and you still haven't received it, that's technically an out that they can potentially have. If you have the listing, you better make sure you ask for all that in advance and it's given right away, because you don't want them to have an out later on. Inspection periods. We saw that, like you mentioned, 3 days. A lot of times it was 0 days, but there's some due diligence you can do, or websites you can send them. Listen, you can find everything online. All you can do, you can go on the city website, see, like, for example, when the last time the roof was replaced, if anything was done legally. So there's some stuff that you can do beforehand to give a little bit more peace of mind in the event that we have that aggressive market again. And then also guesstimate when the acceptance date is going to be. Like, for example, if you want to be aggressive and do a 3-day inspection, you're submitting on Tuesday, you know, it's going to, let's say, get executed on Wednesday of a 3-day, that's Thursday, Friday, Sunday. Technically, you're going to have Monday because it's calendar day, so that gets trickled to the next business days. If there's a holiday, also take that into consideration. A lot of times, listing agents don't realize that. If they do and they're savvy, they're going to come back and change that. But if not, you have that at your advantage. Have conversations up front with, let's say, your buyers. If you know something's not going to appraise, listen, we all know how to pull comps. We all know how to do an evaluation. We're going to know more or less ahead of time if the house is not going to appraise. Have that conversation with them beforehand. If it's an aggressive market, are you willing to pay over and how much? And then protect them by writing the appropriate verbiage on the contract. If it's not that much of an aggressive market, but they really love the house, have that conversation, but then also have a conversation with the listing agent. Are the sellers aware they're overpriced? Are they willing to come down in the event it doesn't appraise? Just so you can more or less have an idea of what to expect. But try to be as preventive as possible with any issues that could arise.
Very well said. Okay, so Tanya, we were just talking about the contract, so let's continue on that topic now. When writing up the contract, if we miss a deadline, how does that affect the buyer? Will they automatically lose escrow, and should a realtor extend the timeline?
So basically, that's very crucial for our buyers. If we miss a timeline, will the buyer actually lose their escrow? Possibly. That can be on the table. But as realtors and doing our due diligence, we have to stay on abreast of everything and on top of the timelines. So what I would say, well, actually, I will make sure that before that comes to the deadline, that we actually have an addendum where we can extend the deadline, or we can extend the inspection period, whatever it is that we need to do, so we do not lose our clients' money. A lot of times, like maybe a year or two ago, you know, some of the sellers will offer some additional money to actually just get their house sold. And I actually, let me just give you an example. I had a client that the seller was willing to give $10,000, you know, over asking price for, you know, to sell the home. And actually, we actually missed a timeline. And it wasn't on my account, but it was more so on the lender's account. And I was devastated. But at the end of the day, I made sure that I had clear communication with the seller's agent, and we were able to negotiate on how we can continue to move forward. So what I would say is definitely make sure you stay on top of it, stay on top of the lenders, stay on top of the inspection period, stay on top of everything that deals with the contract so this doesn't happen. But in the event that it does, make sure you have addendums ready. Make sure you extend any timeline that you need to so we do not lose the escrow money, because we do not want that to happen.
For sure. Well played. Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned the lender, because that's actually one thing I forgot to mention. Always talk to the lender, whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent. If you're the buyer's agent, listen, the contract is not plug and play. It's not just filling out, 30 days. Talk to the lender, especially depending on the type of loan. It might take longer to close, just to make sure you're protecting them, because it's going to be a little harder to ask for an extension beforehand versus having it already on the contract and explaining why you're putting, let's say, 45 days or 50 days, depending on the loan.
So just to piggyback off what Katherine was saying, something that I noticed was that a lot of people were not extending the loan approval period. So it's like you can extend the closing date, but in the addendum you have an option. I mean, depending on which addendum you use. Either you write it down or you have an option to extend the financing period, because like that you're covering your buyer with a contingency.
As a listing agent today, I just filled out an addendum. Well, my team filled out an addendum, and we did that. And it was the buyer's agent. We had a conversation up front, and I made him put more money into escrow to show, so it's a solid buyer. And we agreed that we were going to protect the buyer at all costs, obviously, unless they were just going to default for no reason. But there's an issue with the association providing documentation. So the loan financing contingency period passed. He never said anything. So in an effort, we're all working together here, right? So I said, I'm going to send you an extension, and I'm also going to send you in that extension that thing you just said with the other line for the contingency period.
Oh my God, you're super nice.
I am super nice.
Super
But
nice.
at the end of the day, we're here to protect the public and make a deal close. I'm not here to take
Exactly.
nobody's escrow.
No.
I'm here, not all.
People.
A lot of
No.
them do, yes.
No, I'm only going to take an escrow. Well, not me. A seller's going to take an escrow if you don't come to the closing table, which happened for the first time ever last month. As a matter of fact, the buyer at the day of the closing, imagine this, your seller is at the closing table at 9 a.m. and you get a phone call saying the buyer canceled. You can't do that.
No.
And that's what an escrow is about.
Yeah, we're
An
taking
escrow
that.
says, I'm going to close. I'm not going to walk away for no reason. They walked away for whatever reason. It was no reason. Because how do you wait until the day of closing to tell us that, hey, I'm not going to close? So, yeah, today I did exactly what you said. I put both lines. And, yeah, you have to be on top of that. It's important.
And another thing,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
another thing I wanted to mention was when they had actually offered the $10,000 over asking, instead of taking my client's escrow, I said, hey, well, you know what? If you guys want to take some money away because we need to extend it, go ahead and take some of the money from what you already offered, because I want to keep my clients escrow. And that was something that we negotiated, and it worked out just fine.
So when it comes to extensions, because I know that obviously things happen, right? Things happen with financing, things happen in the transaction. Sometimes it's literally not up to you. Maybe they submitted the documents and it took forever. I've had things where it's like IRS related, where the IRS takes forever to send the document that they need in order to clear the close. But then for me to protect the seller, in the addendum, I'm like, okay, in case this does not close, let's just be clear that deposit is going to be dispersed without a need of release and cancellation, just so it's clear.
I do the
I've-
same
I've
thing
had
to
that
avoid.
done.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do the same thing to avoid a dispute
Yeah,
afterwards. Because if you have to go to mediation or that deposit gets tangled up, you can't even put the house back on the market. And it's just lose
It's
for
a
all
mess.
parties.
Okay.
So I actually had that happen. I'm not an attorney, so don't take this as legal advice. But I had a situation where the buyer sent a release and cancellation. The seller was potentially going to claim an escrow. In the end, they didn't do it because it's going to be too much, just too expensive. So they didn't do it. And the office manager said, I said, well, then does this tie up the property? We're not going to be able to put it on the market. She goes, well, you could do is you can sign a release and cancellation, releasing the money to the seller. They send you a release and cancellation, releasing it to the buyer. You can go ahead and put that property onto the market, obviously disclosing that that's going on so that everybody's aware. And then in the event when you go to escrow dispute, you can still sell it because both properties released the contract. And we can still sell it, but now they're going to go figure out what's going to happen with that escrow. But both parties agreed that they were okay with canceling the contract. So I hope that helps.
Some nuggets.
But
Yeah,
ask an attorney. Ask
People
an
just
attorney.
learned. Yeah. This is only for entertainment purposes only, guys. But we have some great attorneys for you to reach out to. So if you need any, just email Kevin@miamire.com. We'll send you all of them in our affiliate program. Okay, so let's talk critical timelines, guys, that both buyers and sellers need to be aware of when entering a real estate contract. Anybody want to talk about that?
All right. So again, depending on what type of property, the first one, when the deposit is going to be held in escrow. If it's going to be a large deposit, I always like splitting it into two, because even if you cancel during the inspection period, you're sometimes going to have that seller that still doesn't want to release it. So you can always split it into two, and right after the inspection period, they pay the other one. Inspection period, very important.
The most important.
Yes. A lot of people wait till the day after. Maybe you're negotiating a credit and it's almost midnight on the last day, and guess what? Even if the listing agent tells you, yes, they're going to give it to you, but I'm not going to get it signed until tomorrow, still send a release and cancellation just as a protection. Because if they come back the next day, once that's passed, and they say, nope, sorry, they changed their mind, you're stuck, and you have to follow through the contract. Loan approval period. You have to make sure to let them know. It doesn't even have to be in writing, but you just have to let the listing agent know that they received the loan approval. Because if, let's say I have a listing and I've received a better offer and I'm under contract, and the buyer doesn't tell me that they received the loan approval, once that deadline comes, I have 3 days that I could choose to cancel. Well, the seller can choose to cancel. So you have to know all these dates.
Yeah. What do you guys do to remind yourself of these dates? You put it in your calendar. How do you keep track of it all?
Contract coordinator.
So
Transaction coordinator, definitely.
For those newer agents, right, that cannot afford the transaction coordinator, I put everything on my calendar.
Yeah.
Per client, per buyer, per seller, and I just get reminders, and I even write it down on my notebook.
So I know.
Fun fact,
Yeah.
transaction coordinators, like there's many that do charge, but most of them get paid at closing. So if it doesn't close,
Right.
they don't get paid. So get yourself a transaction coordinator, because that will definitely help your business.
I know, but for those
She's talking about like the newer agent that is
newer-
trying to conserve as much of their money as
Right,
possible.
exactly.
We were just talking about our calendars. So whether you are using a transaction coordinator or not, like my Google Calendar is my life,
I love
color
Google
coded.
Calendar.
Add a
Yes.
label for every person that you're working with and their timeline. So if it if you don't want it to occupy your entire calendar, you can always uncheck it. But if you want to check up on timelines, you check that person's name and all the important dates pop up. So it's just making sure you have your calendar on check.
You guys
And I
hear
would
that?
say,
Go ahead.
I would say be fully involved with your clients. Because for me, when it comes to inspections, I'm like, listen, okay, you have their inspection this day. Okay, I'm going with you. Okay, we're going to do this. Okay, you know what? Make sure that you send this inspection over to this person. Make sure you need to change anything? If not, we need to have this back in by this date. This is your last date. So clear communication is so important when it comes to the inspection period. And like, me and Katherine is your name? Okay, yeah. Katherine, the lenders. I mean, a lot of times we give like 3 to 4 lenders and let them choose if they don't already have one. But me and my lenders are best friends.
Yeah.
Because we have to make sure we stay on top of everything. And if I feel like the lender is slipping, I make sure to say, hey, I need you to communicate to my buyer. And vice versa to the seller or whoever they need to talk to.
I got a lot to say that I feel is important on this topic. So there's a difference when you put escrow. So I've had this happen, just talking from experience. So I wish to share that with the world. When you put money into a real estate company in escrow versus a title company in escrow, you have 1 day to deposit your money into your company, and then they have 3 days to deposit that money into the bank. When you have a title company, you have to deposit that money by the end of the business day. There's a difference. So that's important. The second thing is realtors that bill you for the escrow letter, they have 14 days to provide an escrow letter. I can verify that it's there, but a lot of people who say I need an escrow letter by this time, by 5 o'clock, or I'm your default. No, the escrow was made. And if I can verify the escrow was made, you better believe it. The other thing is when you send what she said with the inspection period, and you send out, this is our addendum for the request of whatever it is that we want. And you also send out a release and cancellation. Be careful. Why? First of all, these are two contradictory things. So if they take you to the next level, you better have a good attorney, okay? Second of all, if you send a release and cancellation, I have had the seller sign the release and cancellation and my buyer say, just kidding, I don't need $10,000 anymore. So watch out, because that will happen to you. Third thing, you forgot a very important thing with critical timelines. An association application.
That's right.
If you do not make that association application within the time period that you said you were going to make it, that's a default of contract.
Yeah.
And that is something that some people do not know. And that is critical. So that's very important. And as far as keeping yourself organized, I had one of my preferred lenders send me his checklist on Excel, and I use it. And you put all your contracts into that spreadsheet. And I think that as a real estate agent, as many contracts as you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, whatever, you should be every single day looking at every single contract. And you should, if you have that checklist, it's not a calendar. A calendar is, I don't know. I'm not very good with calendars. I need to get better. I'll be honest. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. But if I see that checklist and I can see all my properties and I can see exactly where they are in the timeline and I can see exactly what documents I'm missing, that for me works. Whatever works for you. But I look at every single transaction every single day, and that's the secret. Just be aware.
So, Dania, to piggyback off what you were saying, there's the addendum that you're able to put the association, you're able to get the approval by certain date. I noticed that a lot of agents leave it blank. Yeah. And I'm like, oh.
I put 1 day because you know what? Sometimes you get that on the day of closing.
I understand. So then it's like what I like to do with the listings that I get, I attach on the listing the association. Every document that pertains to the association, it is there. Don't ask me for it. Don't ask me for the budget. Check the listing. Because that saves you a lot of time and it saves you a lot of headaches.
Oh my God. For anybody that lists a condo, please have on as an attachment the condo right already filled out.
Yes.
They would save so much time.
I do want to piggyback off of it because working or trying to have clear communication with the, project manager or even the condo association, sometimes it's like pulling tooth and nail. It's really, really hard to get a hold of them. In fact, I had, I was representing a buyer a couple months ago. My buyer submitted his application 30 days prior to closing or prior to the deadline where closing was approaching. And we had to submit 2 addendums because of the association's fault, because when it was time for them to get approved, when I called religiously daily, hey, what's the status on the application? What's the status? They failed to disclose that their system was down, and they had to print the application manually and actually drive to the board of directors to take it. So closing didn't take place when it was supposed to. Then when it was scheduled to close, they still hadn't had the application signed. So I had to write up 2 addendums, to extend the closing date. But just so you know that sometimes it's easy to communicate with the association and sometimes it's not, because it also falls on them.
So I had a nightmare situation when I purchased my house. And I don't like to talk about it because I get kind of like really upset about it.
Same.
I get like really upset
I
about
think
it.
we've all had horror stories with our own purchases.
On top of, all the money that's being invested, and this is the house that I got from my mom, the association took forever. And I had to pay $5,000 for an extension of a week.
Wow.
I cried. I literally cried because the seller was taking advantage. This was 2021. The seller was taking advantage at the market. They had like different, and literally like people were putting like $50,000, $20,000 on top of appraised value. So I'm like, listen, I have to make sure that my mom gets her house secured, whatever. So another thing, a lot of agents think that the association is going to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then some associations have the rush fee, which you are able to pay, but you cannot play around with these times. I go to the association, I meet the person in charge or the secretary, I get the application, I ask them, how long does it take? And is it business days or is it calendar days? Because they can say up to 20 business days. So what do 20 business days become? Longer than a month. Yep. So then the estoppels, like everything association related, either go directly to the association, make that connection, because you're going to work with these people eventually. So my management company for the house manages a whole bunch of other properties. So you already start having those connections, but don't think it's just going to take 2 or 3 weeks, because that's where you're at fault and you're not being diligent with what.
Right.
With
I got a question. Do you recommend? I definitely expedited my application. Do you guys recommend that?
It all depends on the time frame. So depending on what you have stipulated on the contract, like if you have 45 days, I think 45 days or 35 days is more than enough if the association says it's going to take 2 weeks. Now, if you understand that this is one of these associations that have like 20 business days, keep it in mind just to have some peace of mind. And just, you count the days. You make sure like you literally go on the calendar and you count the days so you don't put your buyer in that predicament, because it's very uncomfortable. And sometimes we're not talking about the approval. So we get the approval and then that requires an interview.
I was just going to say that, yes.
I'm like, so the board of directors needs to meet one time a month because they're volunteers and they don't get paid for this. So then whenever they can meet, that's when you get the approval signed, because they require an interview prior to.
And then you need to find out if it's in person or they allow via
Over the-
Zoom,
yeah, over the
because
phone.
if by any chance your buyer, since remote closings are becoming such a thing now, buyer could be traveling. And if they're not here and it has to be in person, then they need to figure it out. Or also if they're working and they're far from where they're purchasing and they know it's either going to be extremely inconvenient or they're not going to make it on time, see if there's a virtual component. You can also try and protect them if it's going to be one of those you think it might be problematic by adding in additional terms. If association approval is not obtained a day before closing date gets automatically extended
There you go.
10 days.
There you
And
go.
then it can avoid,
Those issues.
yeah.
I hope we get back to that, because for a while, people were just taking anything they could
I know.
to
Let's talk
run.
about it.
Go on.
No, I mean, think about it. Like, obviously, the market continuously shifts. I've had my license for 18 years. I've been full-time for 11. And I've seen a lot of different markets. I've seen where contracts were, oh, hey, listen, this is the appraised value. We want, 15-day inspection period, we want 30-day commitment, 45-day close. And everybody was like totally cool with it because they needed to sell, because there wasn't people lining up.
Yes.
Then I saw the market where it was like no inspection. I mean, no appraisal. I mean, you were just like
Wait a
Wild Wild
minute.
West out there. You know, now
Save yourself.
look, now we're kind of getting back to this. We're like, hey, listen, you know, we need 7 days, we need 10 days. Like, we can anticipate things. Another thing too is that's important with this is, you know, sometimes when you structure contracts, if you know for a fact, let's say they're asking $50,000, over asking, over value, over appraisal, and you go into that contract and you ask that seller, if in the event it doesn't appraise, what are you going to do? And they don't know, and you anticipate that's going to happen, and the listing agent sometimes just says, let's write it out. And if the buyer, you tell the buyer, listen, the listing agent said, let's write it out. But why are you going to go then and order an appraisal and order, you know, an association application if they just want you to write it out?
There you
So
go.
you might just say, hey, listen, I need 15 days to apply for the association. So you kind of have to like create the timeline for you based on what you have in front of you. So if you know it might not appraise, you'll say, hey, you order the appraisal right away. We can order as a rush, and you have 7 days to get it back. Once those 7 days hit, then you have 3 days to inspect. Once those 3 days hit and you're good, 10 days in, then we'll order the application. Because it's money. It's, you know, so it's structuring. Now, before, like I said, Wild Wild West, there's no structuring. You better just spend or get off, you know? It's like you either drop the money or the next person is willing and gonna drop double. So you better do it. Now it's getting more to that point, but I want to point that out because a lot of agents don't really know that is a possibility to do those things, and you have to be creative. But in order to be creative, you have to know the process, and you have to know what comes next, and you have to know in the steps of whatever property it is. You know, let's say it has a lot of issues, and you know it's going to have a lot of issues, and you're going to potentially need credits or price reductions, and you don't know if they're going to give it to you. You might say, well, then I'll order the appraisal after the inspection, but it all depends on the property, and every single property is going to tell a different story.
But now the appraisal, you brought that up. Have you had to do a reappraisal? Because
Yeah.
the first appraisal comes in and it's like, no, you know what, these numbers are just, I don't know where you're getting these numbers
I've
from.
done 3 appraisals on the same
I've
property,
done
and
the
they're all
same.
different.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, this is very important. FHA appraisals stick with the property for 3 months. 3 months, right?
6.
6. Okay. I know it was a couple months.
6.
So if you do an FHA appraisal, you try to sell it to somebody else, it's going to be the same amount. Conventional appraisals, I've had 3 different amounts in like a month period.
Wow.
Yes.
Why?
Interesting.
Because appraisals are an opinion of value.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. And some people are more conservative and some are a little bit more willing, or, you know, banks. It could be the banks criteria. You don't know. But I have literally had a property appraised 3 different times with 3 different appraisals in a month.
Do you take your own comps?
Of course.
That's something that people don't do. So maybe like starting off or something, it's just like, okay, let me open the door and I have the listing, let me open the door and just let you do the whole appraisal. No, we have to be proactive. We have to make sure that we have comps. These are the comps that I found in the area. By the way, I'm just going to leave it here just for you to review. Most of the time, what I've noticed, a lot of them are, they like to work less and get paid faster, so they'll take that into consideration. So, and just so there's a clear understanding, is there anything wrong with the property, something that affects it? I like to talk to appraisers like that.
Oh, yeah.
When they're
I
there. I talk to
definitely
them all the
talk-
time. I'm
I
like,
talk to-
listen, is there something that you
Yes.
found that I might, you know, just might affect the
Right.
property or the price? Are we good with the
Yes.
price?
Or even like upgrades. Hey, this is new. That's new. They don't know.
They don't know, right?
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to talk to them. For sure.
So out of those 3 appraisal reports, which one did your client?
The highest one.
Okay.
The
Well,
last
I don't
one.
know.
They didn't accept 1, didn't accept 2, and 3 came in, and it was what he needed, and he got it.
And why did he get 3? Because he just
3 contracts.
3 contracts.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
That's
that's
one of those
money.
sellers that's
3
like, you
contracts,
know,
3 different lenders.
you know what? At the end of the
ordering
day,
appraisals.
we can guide them, but we are not them. And they are their own seller. They
Right,
they
of
have to make
course.
their own decisions. And if they decide that they don't agree with something, they can very well say no.
Yes. Wow.
I mean, it as an agent that also works with buyers, like it's heartbreaking almost. Like you're like, oh, that first buyer didn't get it, but
Right.
you know, there are different appraisals, and that's a thing. And different banks have different criteria, and you
Right.
just have to kind of go with it.
So then what happens when you're representing both parties? Because we haven't talked about that.
So
Limited
I haven't been
representation.
lucky enough that many times to represent both parties in a problem. I think maybe 2 deals out of 250, 300 have been both sides. Because it's the highest and best, whatever it is. And half the time it's not you, you know? Got to work with it.
Any final thoughts?
Make sure you communicate.
Yes.
Have open
Yes.
communication at all times.
That's the number one thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Because even if, like, when you were explaining about doing an appraisal before inspection period, this and that, but having the open communication and explaining there is a potential that we're going to have to cancel and you will be out X amount of money. Are you okay with it? If you manage their expectations from the very beginning, they will appreciate that, and then there's less discourse between you and your
Right.
customer.
And it's also being honest, right? Being honest with all parties and making sure that everyone's on the same page.
So something that I wanted to add, something that I've noticed that has been happening lately is that the sellers are asking to do an appraisal prior to. So like that, you're able to get an idea of what the property's going to appraise to, and then you start kind of getting ready for what's to come, because most likely it's going to be close to the amount that the buyer's appraiser or the bank's appraiser is going to send. So that's also an option to do. Just so you can, it's just like with inspections. I see pre-inspections a lot. Like, so you're getting ahead of what's to come, because they're either going to ask you for credit or they're going to ask you to reduce the appraise, work with the purchase price or whatever. So that's something I've seen lately.
You know, another thing, we are transaction brokers and we are a team. We should work together. I see a lot of times, you know, yeah, we're at odds because we're representing the buyer or we're representing the seller instead of representing the transaction so we can close the deal. So I think that if we can come together and realize, okay, hey, we're both on the same team. We're just trying to close this deal. So if we can do that, then we can bypass a lot of the other drama that goes on in real estate.
Absolutely.
So I just had one more little fact because, you know, I got a lot of experiences.
is probably
I'm like, wait. Before you say final thoughts. So in a short sale, you typically have timelines that start once the short sale is approved. That's one thing I want to point out because it's very important. Another thing is when you have low down payment condos, before the craze that people didn't care about, you know, giving the buyer time, I used to write a phrase in the contract, and I used to say, all timelines of this contract begin once we receive the condo questionnaire and the lender can approve the file. Then we will begin our timelines. I think that was a very good point to point out now in a shifting market, because I feel like that's something that people can use moving forward. And I just thought about it, and I didn't want to let the podcast end without all the
I'm
tidbits
actually
coming
going to
out.
start using that. You know what? I learned.
It's good.
It's the magic of a
That's why we're
podcast.
here.
I'll say it again. Do we have any more final thoughts?
I think we can all go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I'm cool with it. Go
No,
ahead.
one thing I was going to mention, also know your properties and then know how each loan can affect them. Like, for example, I had one where I had the listing, and the day before closing, they were doing a conventional loan. The lender calls me and he's like, we have an issue. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I guess their debt got charged off. And it hit their credit the day before closing, and obviously the bank
Yeah, because they check it again
Yep.
right before closing.
closed right before, so it dropped below the standard. He goes, but I ran the numbers through FHA and I can get it approved. And I'm like, okay. So I did the addendum for the extension, had it released, you know, in case it didn't close, funds released right away. All the utilities were on, because for FHA, they check appliances because they need to make sure that it's habitable for the incoming buyers. The water heater was gas and it wasn't working,
Oh, no.
which is like one of those things that you don't think
Think
of.
of.
Yeah,
Right.
the one thing I didn't think of. So he had to just go back out a second time, which took a little longer, but it's just one of those things to keep in mind, the house, the loans, how they affect each other, just so you can be preemptive of anything.
This might be a crazy question, but you brought something up. So let's talk about the different loans and how it affects the timeline. Is that going to take too long?
Well,
How about everybody say one?
for example, if you're doing a government-funded loan, I would speak with the lender, but afterwards I would still tag on a little bit more, at least 15 days extra, because if the government decides to stop the funding, it doesn't matter who calls who. It's not, funds are not getting released. It is what it is, and you're stuck. Anybody else?
So VA appraisals take longer, one thing, and also keeping into consideration the amount of time you give for your loan financing contingency also depends on your appraisal. And another one is my husband.
Newlywed, if you didn't know.
He just closed on an SBA loan, and we wrote in our extension, we said, if the government shuts down, remember there was about to be a government shutdown, we can automatically extend this contract an additional 10 days because all of these things affect everything. That's with commercial world. But SBA, you know, government shuts down, you're done.
Down payment assistance, 60 days, or even longer. Lately, it's been a little bit longer, but they do require 60 days.
With short sale. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you still going?
No,
You sure? Okay, with short sale, it varies because with me, I do a lot of short sales here and there, but I have a short sale specialist, and thank God for her because give or take, you don't know. You're waiting on the bank. You're waiting on making sure that everything the bank is writing off or saying that needs to be paid is up to date. If not, we're on a waiting game.
So this isn't a lending thing. It's more like, for example, if it's a probate sale, most of the lawyers will add in the verbiage, sale is contingent to court approval, but then add verbiage protecting your buyers and their deposit, because if the court does not approve the sale at the end of the day, the deposit is still in limbo.
Yeah.
So you want to protect them as much as possible.
The verbiage always has to be in there for short sales as well. As soon as you write up a listing, you have to put that it is a short sale and, you know, it's contingent to this, that, and the other, so that all parties are aware.
Yeah.
Same thing with probate. I just got probate. I got a probate certified probate specialist class with the Residential Real Estate Council. Work on your CRS, guys, where it's at. And they were just saying that, well, first of all, you cannot even enter into a probate contract until you have a letter of administration. That's very important because a lot of people don't have that going into it. The other thing is with personal experience, they're taking like 35 days, 30 to 60 days. And the language that we put is the buyer will agree to, you know, go into 30, it will take, they will give the probate bank at least 60 days, and in the event that it doesn't close or doesn't get approved, that they will be released back their deposit to protect them, because you're not going to lock them up for more than that. Most people don't want to be.
Because the thing with probate is everything has to go through court approval. So even if, let's say, you have an inspection, there's a $10,000, you're asking for $10,000 in credit, that addendum has to go to the court. The court has to approve it, and then it has to come back. So that just alone just will always add time to the closing.
To piggyback off of that, this year I represented the sellers in a probate sale, and it's also educating, you know, either the buyer or the seller on the process of probate. For instance, my sellers, they're like, oh, you know, it was my mom's property, and now it belongs to us. And I'm like, well, let's see what the court says. Have you been through probate? Have you hired a probate lawyer? Do you know who to hire? And a lot of these buyers and sellers don't know. They just like hire the real estate agent, and then all of a sudden assume that it's gonna be a cakewalk sale, and it's not. Like, when attorneys are involved, you have to have that order, like, in line to even list the property.
Right.
You also have multiple people sometimes that need to decide if that is going to happen, because, for example, brothers, sisters, I've had that situation where it's like one brother lives in like the other country, and then this one lives in New York, and then this one lives here, and they all need to agree that that's the purchase price that they want to sell at. It is a headache.
I'm having that now.
You're having a
right now with my seller.
I'm just like, listen, Jesus Christ, the wheel.
Yes.
And if
Describe it.
and if it's not approved yet, going back to what you said, if it's not a homestead property, I don't remember exactly the time frame, but it's either 30, 60, or 90 days that the property has to stay basically open to see if there's any creditors that put a lien on it.
Yeah.
And then it goes into probate. So you have to have that approval for sale to even put it on the market. If not, you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, this one in particular had credit issues to the property, and also there were liens and violations to the HOA. And the HOA had just switched. They hired another company, so it was even just hard to get a hold of like that point person in the association. But after, I would say maybe like 45 to 70 days, it sold correctly, you know, in probate, you know, the violations. It was just like messy, but we got it done.
Hey, speaking of liens, hey, Linda, come here. So you know it's lienlibrary.com, right? Yes. Here, come to my microphone right now, if you don't mind. This is the perfect time to bring this up, guys. This is going to be a massive resource. I'm going to do the cliff notes that might be not correct, but contacting government is really hard sometimes. So tell us about Lien Library.
So lienlibrary.com is a company that was just founded. It's a startup. It's a startup founded by an individual who I used to work with in government. So we used to work together at the city of North Miami, and he was in charge of all the liens. And he had to go through the process of like assorting everything, putting everything together. The customers would come, the realtors, they'd be angry at him. And he's like, there's got to be a way to streamline this process, right? When staff was not there, you'd have to wait for them to come back from vacation, the whole bit. And so he started lienlibrary.com, where we offered him an opportunity at the city of Miami Gardens. So his first deal, right? Yes. At no cost to the city, you can negotiate your lien online, and you can handle everything online without having to come into City Hall. That is perfect. That's awesome. Right? That's amazing. Yeah. And so it's on the back of the buyer and or the seller. So they streamlined the process. They integrated with the city's like technology tools and IT, and you just go in there, you put in the address, it'll show you all the liens, etc., and it'll tell you, they accept any form of payment, and then you get it solidified, and then within minutes to maybe a day or two, you're in the clear and you can close. Wow. So you don't have to.
That's amazing.
Yeah, title companies may not be happy, but you take the time away from having to go through that whole process and having to delay your closing. So lienlibrary.com, check them out, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Shout out to Linda Julian. She'll be on the next episode. Councilwoman Linda Julian is always on time. So, really special about these podcasts that we're doing this season 3. It's all about our ambassadors. We do have some leadership board members here, but this was designed specifically for our ambassadors. So, hey, if you're looking to get involved with our ambassador program, you have to become a YPN Pro first. How do you do that? MiamiRealtors.com/YPN Pro. Sign up. It's $50. It's not a huge ask. It's for the whole year. And then you can join our ambassador program for free. What is also great about YPN Pro, it also makes you eligible for our 20 under 40 awards and a whole list of things. So we're always looking for new leaders. Shout out to Esther. Shout out to Tanya. And shout out to Karen, who actually was one of our first adapters of the ambassador program, and she got on the leadership board. Yeah, you're one of the first. I didn't even know that. And we had an opening, and listen, we are looking to take from our ambassador program and bring you directly onto the leadership board. So get involved. It is your best way. I'm biased, but I think Miami YPN can change your life. And we're here to enhance your careers and make you successful in an industry where the turnover can be substantially high. And we're doing everything we can to keep you in the industry for as long as you'd like. So with that, I think this concludes. We went from timelines to liens real quick, but it doesn't matter. The information's useful, and we are so happy to be at the AV Club recording. So, hey, guys, look up the AV Club if you want to start your own podcast. Khalid is amazing. I think he'll be on the next episode as well. So until next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be on in next month with another podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.
Bye.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm going to be on my laptop.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I have a full purse. I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm eating before I leave.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm sneaking out for shopping.
We're YPN leaders.
Of course we're going to be creating content.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm signing up for classes.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm Cafecito obsessed.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm going to crash the next happy hour.
Give up on my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? But you still amaze me. Wouldn't it be crazy? If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me?